the subject of my talk today is basically, I mean, in many ways, is a mystery. Everybody, he's known as David Reubeni or David Reubeni. And what we know about him is something, but what we know really about him is there are some memoirs of other people that wrote about him. I mean, people that met him, different people in different countries that met him and wrote what the memories or the impressions of him. He left also something like it's almost like a diary, which is mostly a tale of his what he did for several years in Europe. This is almost everything we know. Now, the point is that except his own writings and the impressions of other people that had of him, in many ways we know almost nothing about him. So very little that it remains in more than one way. He was in his lifetime. It was some kind of a mystery, and he remained up to now the same kind of a mystery, which means we know something about him. There are some facts that we know, and basically we don't know truly and really and truly from where it came, and even we don't know how he died. We just have some kind of a general guesses. All the rest is really a mystery. Point, how does it all begin? They came to Europe. In fact, he came in just about the time framework. His activities were about him for about 10 years or so, from about 1523 to about 10 years later, 10, 11, 12 years later. That is where he was. He really existed, and where we know about his existence. We have some kinds of reference, inside, outside about him. Now, all the rest is, some of it is based on what he told people. Now, the story that he told was on the face of it. It was a bizarre, fantastic story, but at the time, it was on one hand bizarre and fantastic, but how to say it? People really didn't know whether to believe him or not, because the knowledge of so many things that we know now in a better way was in those times we don't know. So the main story was, I mean, that is the way he introduced himself. That is the way he came to Europe. We know, I mean, from descriptions of other people, that he wasn't a tall man. He was middling, or perhaps even slightly smaller than the average. And he was darkish. I mean, he didn't look like a typical, say, European Jew. He was slightly or more. That is very hard because the descriptions, we don't have any picture. We don't have almost anything else about him. So what we have about him is what people wrote, memoirs, letters, and so on about him. So it seems that he was a smallish, thin, darkish person, dark with dark coloring of face, and that was more or less about what we basically know about how he appeared, as I say, in Venice in the year, as I say, 1523. He came there to the Jewish community, and he told them his story of his life, and what he wants from the community. So the story of his life was, this is the story. The story was that he belongs to a Jewish kingdom that is somewhere, possibly, I mean, the description wasn't always very, very clear, but again, you have to remember that even with better descriptions, geography of those times wasn't that accurate. People knew those places that they were in, but they really didn't have any good map of what happened in other countries. Surely not in Asia and Africa. So all of these things were mostly, I mean, people knew just basic coasts of different countries, but didn't know what is within the country. They knew about some countries, but a part of it was made of legends, stories, and inaccurate knowledge. No real maps of any place. So he claimed that he belongs to a Jewish kingdom that is possibly somewhere in Arabia. A Jewish kingdom. In this kingdom live the descendants of what are called the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Menashe. That he himself he is a prince. His brother, and called the brother name, his brother is the king, now the king of the country. And his father was called Solomon, he himself was called David, his brother was called Joseph, and he is the son of the king of that country. And that he always, at the beginning at least, his basic claim was that he said that what is he basically? Basically, he said, I am not a specially learned person. I am not a scholar. I'm a soldier. I was a commander in the army, in our army, and I'm coming as such, as a messenger of my brother, the king, that has big plans. And some of the plans are basically he wants to make some kind of a agreement, a treaty, some kind of a mutual help arrangement, in which most of what he wanted was, he said, we have an army, and we can fight, and we do fight, and we are not afraid of the Arabs. We, in fact, we want to go to expand and to fight the Muslims, up to the point of getting from our place, getting and conquering our way to Eretz Israel. But he said, we are not such a big people, and as courageous and fighters as we are, we really need something to tip the weight in our side, and we need guns, European guns. Now, if we get the guns, so we can begin our fight, we'll begin the war against the Muslims, and we'll drive them away. That was the story. And he came to Venice, we don't know from where, and he came with this thing, and what he wanted from the people of Venice, there was a Jewish community, and some of it was important Jewish community. Some of the important people there were exiles from Spain, and some of them were what I call influential people. His basic idea was that he wanted the community of Venice to help him to get to Rome, and to have then a basic negotiation with the Pope. And from the Pope, he wanted later on to continue he knew that the Pope doesn't have any ammunition. Doesn't have a real army, but he wanted to get recommended by the Pope to some of the great kings of Europe, and with them to make this treaty. That was the main story, which eventually he was sent to Rome. I'm stopping here at this point. See, the question whether there was, anything like this, even a small Jewish entity in the Arabian Peninsula, is very doubtful. It wasn't doubtful. It wasn't doubtful because it was completely impossible. In fact, at the earlier times of Muhammad, there were indeed not only Jewish inhabitants in what is called now in the Arabian Peninsula, but some of them were arranged by tribes, and they were living near or connected in some way with the Arab tribes of the same place. In fact, we know that Muhammad, in his time, had several wars with those people, with those Jews, and in fact, he made with them some kind of a treaty. They will remain in their place, won't be molested, and be something continual and independent existence. Now, all that is a part of history. It's not a story, it's part of history. Now, this was one of those very first agreements, and it is. I don't want to make any contemporary, allusions, but at least it has some kind it makes some kind of sense. Even though Muhammad signed such an agreement, he was clearly not intending to fulfill it. It is one of the things. It was, in fact, it is Quranic and post-Quranic tradition. He was from the beginning intended to break the agreement, and he did. He attacked them, and possibly killed all of those that he could. But he became stronger. At the beginning, he wasn't strong enough to do anything with them, so he made a treaty. And in fact, just to make a note again, you can, wherever you stand in politics, you can you draw your own conclusions. At the time, Arafat would not, in his talks to us, or his talks in the United States, but his talks with the Arabs, he would always mention this agreement as a kind of it's not just precedent. It is some kind. The Prophet himself did the same thing, which is he made some kind of a treaty with the intention of not fulfilling it, which means a treaty was temporary. It's a kind of the most of it was a ceasefire until he will be strong enough to finish the war. So that was incidentally what Arafat said, but this is, I won't say that it sheds the best nice light on the personality of Muhammad. But that is again, that is not the subject of discussing if Muhammad was what they call the great tzaddik of the ages or something else. That's not the point. But I'm just saying it puts even in the beginning of Islam, this notion that agreements and treaties are valid as long as you want to keep them, and afterwards you can break them, and you are not ashamed of it. But that's a part. It has to do with Islam and with the history of Islam and many other things. But that's not the point. The point was there were the Jews of Khaybar. Possibly that is the allusion of David Reubeni to the same place. Khaybar was a group of. It was a city, and there were some inhabited places. It was some kind of oasis in the desert, and there were Jewish tribes there, and some of those Jewish tribes lived and I would say were quite respected by the Arabs, even though the Arabs then were what are called Haitians, pagans, and the Jews were Jews, more or less Jews, and they even have some poetry, Arabic poetry written by Jewish poets that are in a certain way a part of the traditional, very ancient Arab poetry. There was a famous person there. It was also stories about him. It was in Hebrew, it's Shmuel ben Adiyah, Samuel ben Adiyah, which was the head of a little tribe or part of a tribe, which is it's a part of his writings and his personalities are part of Arabic tradition from that time on. So, as far as we know, Muhammad basically, or he and his followers that became, Islam began as a small group of people, but it grew and grew and grew. It became very powerful enough to topple down, the big empire of Persia, Iran. Nothing a very long time after Muhammad, which means it has lots of growth and of ability to conquer. So the question whether this was never completely settled, whether any kind of a Jewish existence remained in Khaybar it was doubtful. It doesn't seem that the Arabs likes to have. It was a part of the Muslim law and Muslim tradition. They never really wanted to have any other people that are the only relationship that they had with the people was either you kill them or you enslave them. But to have independent people, free people that are equal, this was possibly it goes against the grain. But that is, again, I'm just speaking about I'm not speaking about any contemporary things, but I'm just saying that's a part of Islam. Part of it is what I call not only it's a part of it is theological or more than theological tradition, theology. So the question whether there were any Jews remained in Khaybar. It was something of a fortified city in Arabia. It seems to be very, very doubtful. So, from where came the Jewish inhabitants of that kingdom, which is beyond the desert, and the other side of the world? So, it could be that it's a nice story. That is one thing. The other part of it was, and that is the late and important person, Cassuto, in Italy. He was at the beginning in Italy. Was a great scholar. This wasn't his subject, but he was interested in it, and he thought that David Reubeni was basically a Jew from Ethiopia. He was an Ethiopian Jew, a Falasha. say, or as they call themselves, Beta Israel. He was a Jew from there. Now, in Ethiopia, the war about this time, earlier and later, it was the situation there for anything of an independent Jewish existence did existed. There was a time when there were not just tribes, but almost a small independent kingdom that was considered a Jewish kingdom, a Falasha kingdom in Ethiopia. There was such a. It was destroyed, we know, years later by war, one war and another war, by the Christian kings of Ethiopia. But there was, for some times, there was not just a small tribe, but there was a significant number of Jews there that had their own, as much as any other Ethiopian tribe had, was they were from there. Anyway, so this could explain, among other things, the fact that the stories about him that speak about him as a dark person, much darker than the people that they knew. So it could be that he was a Falasha. That is, in a way. Now, the story that he told about the Jewish king and so on, these stories were common at the time, and sometimes later. In the big way, they basically couldn't be exactly like this. See, there was not in his time, as far as anybody can know, not in Ethiopia, nor anywhere else, an independent Jewish existence that was big enough to become a state and to have an ability to not only to exist somehow, tolerated or not tolerated by others, but to exist and to have a real ability to fight against others. I say Ethiopia was the last place like this. Just to mention, I don't know if you are, you know the streets of Jerusalem, because the streets of Jerusalem are full of history, and every group of streets, this is possibly the only city in the world that has the streets are arranged in Jerusalem like subjects. So you have a group of streets, the streets of the kings, streets of prophets, of minor prophets, streets of the judges, streets of all kinds of things. I am living, for example, in a neighborhood of historians. So a few streets for historians. Now there is a very small alley near the Russian compound. They possibly made it into a neighborhood for kings. So you have there the Rehov Helena Malka, the street of Helena, which is basically she was indeed a queen of a small kingdom that converted to Judaism, indeed, and they created a small some kind of a Jewish kingdom many years before the Khazaria. But there was a Jewish kingdom, and just if I may say, just because you are under the rain and so on, and the snow may be outside. See, this kingdom, we know from Josephus that when the last kings of this kingdom died, they left their kingdom as a gift to the Jewish people. It's not a very big kingdom, but it was independent. It was a semi-independent kingdom under the Persian overrulers. So the Persian Shah, whatever it was then called, was the overruler of the place. But they were considered the called kings of the place, and they had an independent country. Now, we should possibly go to the UN and claim that piece of land, because it is now, at the names of now, it is basically on the place where the city of Mosul Mosul in Iraq is, which is basically this area of Adin, that was called, is possibly has the biggest oil reservoirs in the world. So it would be nice to get at least a percentage of that of the oil that they have there. Kirkuk and other places are there. That is within the realms of that old kingdom. Anyway, nearby you have a small street that is called Rehov Dunwas. You can easily miss it. This street of Dunwas. It's a very, very small street in that area. Dunwas was, again, he was a proselyte king in Yemen. But he was the king of the people of Yemen. He was a Jewish king, and he, in fact, he became more and more powerful, conquering more and more land, and until he wanted to cross over, which is not far from Yemen, to Ethiopia, and to fight against the Christian kings of Ethiopia. At the end, he was killed in war, and he remained just one of those little romantic memories that we have, because we, as Jews, we have not only stories about rabbis, but also some other stories, more romantic to say. So that is Yosef Dunwas. You'll find they gave him a very small street, but still they kept his memory. Anyway, I'm saying that at those times and in that place, there was perhaps some kind of a remote possibility of some kind of a slight Jewish existence. Not in the way that Rabbi Reubeni described it, but perhaps there was some kind of a slightly independent thing. Again, with all that, one of the things is clear, that he told more or less that he somehow managed to find a ship and to get to Italy, from wherever country he was. He didn't give many details about his life, except that he was, as I say, he was a fighter. He was basically a commander of an army. That is his profession. He wrote his memoirs. The memoirs are intact. You can read them. Now, they are written in Hebrew. Had he been a Falasha, an Ethiopian Jew, the Jews there never had any Hebrew. They didn't and they don't have any Hebrew originally. Their basic language is an Ethiopian language. And the holy language of the Ethiopian Jews is also not Hebrew. There's not one word of Hebrew. Hebrew is for them a completely foreign language. They have the Bible, of course, but the Bible is in Ge'ez, which is the old Ethiopian language, not anything else. Now, when he writes in memoirs in Hebrew, it's a strange Hebrew, but it's readable. It's readable Hebrew. So he had to spend lots of time of learning Hebrew, somehow, in one way or another. And there is also, I'm not going to deal in the details about the research that people done about his memoirs, because he seemed to know more than he should have known had it been exactly what he described. So, in so many ways, it seems that he came basically from nowhere. Either he was born in Ethiopia or in another place. He was seemingly, even though some people suspected him of being a European Jew that lived for many years in the East and learned something about the habits, about the ways of life. That was one thing. The second thing about him was he clearly, when he appeared, not just walking or riding a horse or holding a sword, he clearly appeared not as a fellow that came from a ghetto. He clearly appeared as a person that was a soldier. I mean, a soldier or commander of some place. I mean, the way people wrote about it, the way he was riding a horse, and he rode horses. He was when he came to Rome. Already with all the help that he got, he came riding on a white horse with a big flag that was given to him by one of the noble ladies of the time, a flag with a certain dibrot on it in Hebrew. So he came in a very impressive way. Clearly, what he was, he wasn't a tall person, but he was very impressive. In one way or another, he came there as a soldier. Now, as I'm saying, I'll come back to it. See, who was he? Basically, it doesn't seem, by any means, and by any way that you can deal with his story, that he was telling a story of something that really existed. He began his life with something of a story. It was a tale. And he began his life with coming from a remote place in which he was a prince. And now he is going to do something there. Now, on the as much as anybody can think about it, he was indeed a person that is the first parts, which are not very detailed. His first parts in which he tells about his childhood or his life in his native country are not very detailed. It doesn't give you any real geography, any good description of the place. It just tells in general. It's a Jewish state. We have our judges. We have our rules. There were stories like this where there was another story that happened many years earlier of Eldad Hadani, a person that came from nowhere and told people that he is a part of the tribe of Dan, and came there speaking a strange kind of Hebrew that nobody knew from where it came. But that he was a person that came from a different country, and he came to Rome. Now he's now in Rome about the year 24 or so, 1524, something around this time. He couldn't, of course, because he was officially, he didn't come with a big army. He came with some servants, and possibly the money for them was provided by some of the members of the Jewish community in Venice. It seemed that he made a big impression on some of the big Jewish ladies there, and they gave him whatever he needed and more. Now, that's one thing. And he came there. He first, in Rome, he met one of the cardinals, who was a humanist and a person who himself tried to learn Hebrew. So there was some kind of common ground. And after talking with Cardinal enough times, he was introduced to the Pope. He stayed for some time with the Pope, and then eventually he convinced the Pope to the point of giving him letters of recommendation to the Karl V, that was one of the greatest rulers of the time, the ruler that was in a way about whom they say that in his empire the sun never set, because his empire began from one side of the outest reaches of America to Austria and Czechoslovakia at the time, Spain of course included. So he received one letter to him, and then another recommendation to the King of Portugal, who was then also a big empire, a big maritime empire, and let me just say that the Pope, because on one hand, he liked the idea, see, he liked the idea of having, and so he said also in his letters, if the story is true, so he may have a way of really getting back and making a big crusade on his own against the Muslims, because it was always difficult, and you have to remember that that's about the time in which the Turkish Empire began to, it was not only big, but it was growing very, very fast and very fiercely. So this was that part. So it was a kind of a hope that somewhere there may be under the lines of the Muslims there is another. We can find somebody that will be our allies in fighting against the Muslims, possibly entering into Eretz Israel. That was, but he wasn't given orders. He wrote letters of recommendation to those two kings, and he said, basically, you find out more about the facts. You find them out more about the facts, and if there is any truth to it, then you can go on and help him. That was about what the letters were. He also received from the Pope letters from the again another perhaps legendary ruler, Prester John. That was the legendary ruler of a huge Christian country in the Far East. So, and he was. So the idea was that there was such a king, such a big king in the East, perhaps around the borders of China. Again, it was a story, a very common story. It was very, very, very well known in those times, in the late Middle Ages and later, possibly based in a certain way on the fact that some of the Mongol Khans, the descendants of Genghis Khan, some of them they were in favor with Christians. Some of them had Christian wives, and Marco Polo was some years before wrote about his visit to Kublai Khan, who was the great Khan of the Mongols. So he wrote about them. He wrote about how important were the Nestorian priests, which were not Catholics, but they were at least Christians. They were there in the court. So the story could grow from that notion there is indeed at the end of Asia there is a huge kingdom, a huge Christian kingdom in which that is there. So David Reubeni got also a letter for the ruler of that country from the Pope. Okay. Now he didn't go at this time to Karl V. He doesn't really explain very much, even in his diaries. But he went to Portugal. He went to Portugal, and he stayed for 2 years in Lisbon. These are, in many ways, we know about these years because they are very documented in different ways. And he came with the same offer. He needs guns, basically. He needs a whole shipment of guns. He will take them to his country, and then they will begin their attack on the Muslims. That was his offer. So he came. Says he is empowered by his brother, the king, and by the rulers of the judges or the senate of that country to deal with any foreign power. So that was the story. Now he came there, and with the same kind of appearance, which possibly is Fingrove, and he was really an interesting person, among other things, and that is part of his, not only of his diaries, but he was in his own life very ascetic person. He used to fast sometimes for 2 days running, or sometimes he fasted for 3 or 4 days in one continuation, and he was praying and so on. So he was clearly a deeply religious person, and very much given to religious contemplation and so on. That was one side of it. The other side was to see something like a Jewish prince in Lisbon, in which the last Jews were driven out, say, a quarter of a century before. That there were those who came from Jewish families were just Marranos in there, and he's coming there, so riding a horse, behaving like a prince. Now, it is clear that it made a huge impression, if not on the Christians, it made a huge impression on the Jews. Those Jews, I mean, those Marranos, who were converted to Christianity, surely against their will, and with the notion that there is no hope and no vision for any kind of a future. Now, they were there. And you have a real Jewish prince who's speaking about, not in a short time, redemption. In a certain way, redemption comes. Now, it seems that David Reubeni also changed slightly his way. So when he spoke to these people, and the people came to him, kissed his hands, came to help him, came to do anything with him, and asked for his advice and so on and so forth. And it became more and more influential. He said in his memoirs that surely that the king of Portugal just scolded him of, I mean, did you come here to spoil all the Christians in my country? See, you are just destroying everything, all the good work we did with the Inquisition and so on. We spoiled the whole thing, because he says that all the Marranos, he speaks about them, old men and young men, men and women, all of them flocked around him, and he made an impression on many people. See, as I say, the impression, we don't know how much it was in himself. See, and how much of it was the fact that he represented something like a dream, see, and the dream is the lowest part of their life. Comes now the great hope, there comes a Redeemer, and he was, I mean, I'll just put it in a way, because, see, in later times, when Jewish historians wrote about him, and they wrote about him sometimes as, could he be put in the list of the false messiahs? There is a long list. It's all kinds of people. Some of them were simple imposters. Some of them were very, very interesting and illustrious people, those false messiahs. And there were many of them in the long history of Jewish exile. So, but he, at least at the beginning, he never claimed any kind of messianic claim. It's just his what I call, what he said basically was, I am a simple person, I am not a scholar, I am not a saint, I am a simple sinning, it has a root to say, I am a simple sinner, that is my own, the only thing that I know is soldiering, see? And I'm coming here for a negotiation. And now, one of the points, it wasn't possibly the last point, and we'll come to it in next one of the next speeches. one of the people that was attracted to him was a young man, very talented, and that was already in his possibly in his 20s to a very high position in the Portuguese court as a priest. A man that was called at that time Diego Pires, and he not just became influenced, but he decided to come back to Judaism. He circumcised himself, and he began to behave as a Jew, which was a deadly sin in the eyes of the government. Deadly in the sense that it carries with it a death penalty. Seemingly, it was one of the advisors of Reubeni that advised him just to get as much as fast as early to get out of Spain and to move to some other country that will be tolerant. Now that is another story, because this man was later on called in Jewish history Shlomo Molcho. Shlomo Molcho was a great personality in a different way. We'll speak about him next times. But basically, that was one of the people that David Reubeni attracted. Now, he attracted possibly many people. Now, in Portugal itself, they possibly, as much as we can know, he came from nowhere. He didn't really have any real basic proofs of the validity of his claims. And with the time, for the government, for the officials, it became more and more something like a joke. See, he's coming, claiming all kinds of claims that seem to be just pipe dreams. He doesn't show anything that he can do. So at the end of it, he was basically asked to leave the country. Didn't accomplish anything. He left the country and went again, as far as we know, he went again to Italy. Now, some of the details, we don't know many of the things there, but seemingly he was on his way out. He was caught. I mean, his ship was caught by a Spanish man of war. But somehow the Spanish king, Carl V, somehow gave an order to release him and to let him go farther on. So he went back to Italy. Now, the story later on is he spent some time in Italy, and again with the Jews, and with this kind of a claim. The King of Portugal didn't give him anything. But the point was, the King of Portugal was indeed, at least he took notice of him. He spoke with him as a royal ambassador, at least for some time. So, and the fact that he was kicked out of Portugal was mostly because the King of Portugal and quite surely the priests around him said that this man is a very bad influence on our own Christians, surely on the new Christians, because you can understand that having a person like this, even his existence, whatever it is, you have a clear, open Jew walking in the streets of a city which didn't allow any Jew to live. So he's there, and he's there as a guest of the king, as a person that goes into the palace. It was a kind of a dream, not a complete dream, but half of a dream that was made true. Now, let me just say a few things which are of some, I suppose, of some importance. Now, if, as it seems to be, I'm going later on to the end of David Reubeni, which is not a very long time. What we know is not a very long time later. See, what was he? he wandered from one place to another. He received all kinds of very nice treatment. The Jews treated him really like a prince. But that was all. So he got a place to live in. And if he wanted to eat, which seems to be he was thriving on fasting more than on eating, that he could get anything that he wanted. In this way, basically, there were all kinds of things that he writes about his servants and the way that they got entangled with other people's servants. All these things are just what I call small gossip of a person that has a small entourage with him, and they are there, and none of them really knows what the facts are. So he was there. What did he want? See, if you take the story, he wasn't claiming, surely not at the first stages of his coming there. He didn't make any messianic claims. He came as he said something that was commonplace and down to earth. So this person is coming there. If as much as we can know the story of his life, the story of his early life is just a nice romantic story that he invented. From wherever he came, whether he came from the east or came from the west, whether he was one kind of person, another kind of person, he really came from he came from the 10 lost tribes, but he really came from nowhere. Let me just say the point about the 10 lost tribes. It's not only now something of a hobby of people to find them anywhere, and they find them. Somehow it's funny. They find them from Africa to the ends of Asia. My suggestion, for example, if somebody would like to take it, is the people that have the best claim to be the 10 lost tribes. I don't know if we want them, possibly we should, are the Pashtun people of Afghanistan. They have really, historically and otherwise, they have the best claim of being of descendants of the 10 lost tribes. So just imagine that we can convince them, because they are now Muslims, just imagine we can convince a few million of them to come here. We put them on the borders of Israel. Nobody will dare to penetrate these borders, because these people are known as being very tough. No government could really quash them. So but going back to reality, not to stories or jokes. So he came with a story like this. And I say stories like this, they could have some kind of a remote connection with facts. As I say, even in Afghanistan, in our times, some of the people of Afghanistan still have some Jewish customs, and I myself met some of the people there, and they claim for having what are called Jewish names. I mean, Jewish names. They say that they are of this tribe. I met a fellow who introduced me, had his name tag was really in Arabic, in Afghan. So it was the tribe of Joseph. That was his last name, Yusuf Zadeh. So, and there are other people that are claiming to be the descendants of Ephraim, descendants of. But that's I'm just saying that even now there are still what I call half-dream memories of that. Possibly in those times there were more, but not the story of David Reubeni. So the point was, just imagine. Okay, let's say that he convinces the king of Portugal or the king of Spain to help him. What would he do with these guns? Let's say that he gets 200 guns, heavy guns, and he gets a ship. What would he do with them? Now, let me just give something which is I can't give any proof to it because, as I say, that's a whole mystery. This whole story is a mystery. Let me go back to the. It seems that somehow years later he met his former, say, pupil or friend, young friend of Shlomo Molcho in Rome, and then he himself, David Reubeni, spoke more open about the hopes of the Messiah coming, and he went with Shlomo Molcho to a mission impossible, which was really the combination of those two people was in itself remarkable. I'll speak about it later. Shlomo Molcho had the idea. See, Shlomo Molcho was really very much learned in Christianity. He was a priest before that. He decided to go with David Reubeni to the King of Spain, Karl V, and to try to convince the king to convert to Judaism. Nice idea. So they come, two people, they come as messengers, and let's go to the King of Spain, try to convert him to Judaism. Okay, this King of Spain was, among other things, a very strong Catholic, a very strong Catholic, from a Catholic family. It was, the end of it was what the King of Spain did was, they took Shlomo Molcho and executed him. Because according to the church law, he was a heretic and should be executed, and so he was. David Reubeni was seemingly sent to some place in Spain, in prison, and we don't know anything about him beyond, say, the year 32 or so, 32, 33, 15, 32, 33. We know that he was sent to Spain. We don't know at what place. There are some stories about it, and basically, it seems that he was put in prison. We don't know what kind of prison, and died in prison, naturally, with no date. So we don't know where he was born. We don't know when he died. We don't know about where he spent his childhood, and we don't know how his old age was spent. We just, as I say, we have here a kind of a mystery, just a mystery of a person that is somewhere from the other side of the world, or at least claims so. And he's trying to do something, but which is still a big mystery. No. I'll just say something, which is, I don't know if it is an explanation or defense or anything else about David Reubeni. See, there was a man who did something very similar to it, which was, he spoke to the Jews about the possibility of getting back to their land. He created some kind of a Jewish organization. On the force of that organization, he went to deal with the kings of the world, important rulers of the world, as a representative of those Jews. The Jews didn't really appoint him to be their king, but he was important enough. So he came to those rulers of the world and tried to convince them. Now, he was in a way, that man that I'm telling you was a much later time. He was, in one way you may call him, an extreme confidence trickster, because he played the two sides. He was, for the Goyim, he was the king of the Jews. For the Jews, he was something like a messenger sent from heaven, somebody from the other side of the world. Now, he played this game for a few years and died. Strangely enough, this man, who was called, if you didn't guess it, he was called Theodor Herzl. He, in fact, with this kind of a game. See, meeting on one hand, talking with the Jews, and the Jews had great respect because he's the man that met the Kaiser Wilhelm, the person that made the Sultan of England, the person that met everybody as an important person. Now, for these people, they thought that he's representing the Jewish power and Jewish might, which he didn't. But at least the Wilhelm, again with letters of recommendation by all kinds of people, he came to meet him. You have pictures of that. So the point about Herzl is, see, it seems that sometimes things like this can be done. You can do something to what is, you can create a real thing from playing both sides against each other, from playing what are called two unknowns with each other, and create something real, which is, if you can think that Rabbi Reubeni was in a way a forerunner, not of people like Pinsker and other people that were the early what I call Chovevei Zion and others. They were nice people, but none of them had this notion and this breath and this appearance of becoming so much like the Prince of the Jews. Now it seems that all in all, and that again, it has nothing to do now, but if you think that Zionism is the greatest thing that happened to the Jewish people, or the Satmar Rebbe thinks that's the greatest disaster that happened to the Jewish people, but it happened. See, Herzl was the person who created really on power of being, what was he? He was a journalist in an Austrian paper, important paper. It was well known. People read his writings. But that was that. That was that. He didn't have any other power, not the power of money, not the power of political help or anything else. But he played something that was a need, a desire, and people that somehow could agree to do something. So I'm just thinking, and again, we don't have any proof for it. See, because Herzl also left the diaries, more frank and more detailed about his life. David Reubeni left his diary, which is in some detail, in some parts it's very detailed. I mean, how much money this fellow stole for him, or how much money this great lady gave him, all kinds of things. But we don't really have a real writing about, of course, what was inside the person, what was his plan. As I'm just saying, as a kind of an idea. Here you have a person who could possibly have the same kind of a big personality, the big images, the big dreams, the notion of that possibly he could play the Jews with the Maranos, with those that were still, Jewish power wasn't perhaps as big, but there was enough real Jewish power in the world, and to take into it other powers that were willing to collaborate and somehow create between them to create a new existence. So in that sense, and as I say, on the face of it, it's all in all, it doesn't seem that David Reubeni had much more. But this is, what I am saying is, it's perhaps not it is not, I don't know if it is real, if it is true, but at least it makes some kind of a sense of that person. Because the person, as I say, here is a person who is a mystery from beginning to end. That is, we don't know anything from where he came and where he went. We don't know. We don't really even know really what was his real education. It seems that he had more education than he claimed. But from where? we knew that it was some kind of not just a deep religious person, but we don't know much about from where this came. It doesn't say who were his teachers, who were the people who influenced him. So to say in that sense, it's a real, the people wrote 1 or 2 novels about him. And it still remains a mystery because we don't have more information now than we had 200 years ago or 300 years ago. We don't know more about him, but we have the story. And when I mentioned Herzl, it is just shows that things like this, even though it's very hard to imagine and very hard to invent, are indeed the best proof that they are possible is the fact that they have been done. So it has been done. So you cannot say that an idea like this is a idiotic idea that doesn't have any existence. It is an idea. It is an idea. And in those times, just imagine if he could be more convincing. If the Jews with him were, he couldn't really command anybody, even not his servants. He couldn't command anybody. He couldn't really make the people following in a well-organized organization, because in a certain way he put himself in a position that was playing between the 2 parts, two sides of an equation, with trying to make some kind of a solution. But if so, not as a Messiah. He wasn't. He didn't even, basically, even in the best moods, he never claimed that he is. There are sometimes when he tries to say that he comes he's a descendant of the King David, which is in contradiction to his other stories of his. But that's not important. To claim to be a descendant of the King David, I suppose of you, possibly half of you, can have such memories in your mind. Somebody in the family had such a claim, and because a long time passed since the King David, there's a chance of somebody is a descendant of his, not a direct descendant, son after son, but to be a descendant of his. There's a good chance of having thousands, perhaps more than thousands of people with this claim. So that's not important. As I'm saying, here you have this person, and I'm trying. It's not apologetica for David Reubeni, whom we don't really know anything about. It's a kind of a, could he have been a person of what I mentioned, a great visionary, a great political visionary that tried to do something that is on the verge of the impossible, but not completely so. So that he tried to do these things. He was in his life, for it was a failure. Nothing remained of him except, as I say, memories and some of the things written about him. Not all of them were what are called friendly, but there were also some very friendly people that were of some substance that wrote about him with great amount of respect for personality, to his wisdom, to many other things. But here you have, as I say, one of the real people of mystery that we have. We have questions in history about many people that we don't know enough about them, and they leave gaps of information here, there. With him, it is not a gap. It is just a full-fledged mystery, see, in which we have just a small part is revealed. All the rest is unknown. But still, all in all, if you take it, it's as I say, it has all the materials of a big novel that doesn't have a beginning or an end, but it's pieces from a big history that didn't exist perhaps, but a big history. So that is the Reubeni. And I say in those times, and I remember, I'm going back to speak about the times and what happened in those times. Look, in those times, all in all, you have, as I try to explain, these times were times of a huge upheaval in which the worlds are changing. It's not just a official date for the beginning of the new age. It's a beginning of lots of new things. Things that were the past is being destroyed, a future is being built. The countries are being discovered. The world is becoming bigger, more complex, more interesting. Things are coming back and forth, and so everything changes. And in these things live those Jews that in many ways were the people that were caught in between those two edges of religious fanaticism on one hand, and they themselves were, in a certain way, most of these people were on the other side of it. Almost all of them were intellectuals of the time. And those people lived in such days. So things happened to them. And some of the people that I plan to speak about later have histories that seem to be almost as near, but they had a better beginning, and they even had a better end. None of them really created the new world that anybody wanted, but it was a time in which you can see, as I say, we say in the prayers, Yom Harat Olam, which is in a certain way, it's a world coming to labor. You see, something can be born in this time. It's a time, it's a labor of history. It's a kind of something, a rift, a change. Things can be changed dramatically in such a time. And so the people that lived in this rift, some of them were scholars, some of them were merchants, some of them were people of other descriptions that were living in this, I would say, impossible kind of existence. And so David Reubeni is, in that sense, a part of a period which is the mystery, the man of mystery, a real man of mystery that lived in those times. And his life, his attempts, his trying to do anything, is really a depiction of what the world looks like. It's the world looks like in which nothing that was known is any longer known. You don't really know what is the other side of the ocean. You don't know what is the other side of the world. You don't know if there is, it's about the time, a little bit earlier, when they decided that they didn't discover India. That Columbus didn't discover India, but he discovered something that was, again, something that didn't have any existence. Nobody knew about it, and here comes a whole huge continent is somehow born out of nothing. So all these things are a part of a world that is moving, losing all parts of it in one side and creating other things. And so in this world, those people that I spoke about living in those times are the people that are, all of them are at least extremely interesting people.